Brazil's former leader Lula da Silva loses his appeal as a court upholds his conviction for corruption. We speak to his successor in our exclusive interview with the impeached president, Dilma Rousseff. I'm Imran Garda, and today's newsmaker is the fall of Brazil's Workers' Party. He's consistently been one of Brazil's most popular politicians, and the former president, Lula da Silva, still harbors political ambitions. But he may never be able to hold office again, now that a court has upheld his conviction for having accepted bribes in exchange for favors. The star of the once powerful Workers' Party says he'll continue his fight to be on the ballot. But there's a chance he could even be behind bars by the time the election rolls around October. Still, polls suggest Lula could cruise to victory, which would be a dramatic return to power for his party after his protege, Dilma Rousseff, was impeached 2 years ago. Both politicians say they're being unfairly targeted by their political opponents. In a moment, I'll speak with Lula's lawyer, and then we'll hear from Rousseff herself. But first, here's the moment the appeals court handed down its ruling.
Unfortunately, we are convicting a former president, but who committed a crime and directly or indirectly plotted with the complicity of many others, which indicates the need of censure above what normally would have been given in the dosage of the reprimand.
And joining us now is Lula da Silva's lawyer, Valesca Martins. She joins us from Porto Alegre. Valesca, always good to talk to you. Lula has lost the appeal. Are you going to move on and accept the verdict?
Of course not. We'll keep on appealing until we're able to prove in an independent and impartial court his innocence. Yesterday, we witnessed what would call a political trial. They have overlooked. They have not analyzed all of the overwhelming evidence of his innocence. He was convicted of a crime. He was convicted of a crime that he wasn't accused of, with no evidence, based on hearsay. And it is a highly questionable trial. Therefore, we'll keep appealing nationally and internationally until we can prove his innocence.
The last time we spoke, you told me that you felt Judge Sergio Moro was compromised. When I look at the details here, all three judges unanimously upheld the corruption conviction. Are you saying that they are all compromised?
I'm saying the car wash operation is compromised. It has become a matter of the car wash against Lula. It has become a matter of confirming the PowerPoint they presented in September of 2016. It is a political persecution. He is a victim of lawfare, which is the misuse and abuse of legal means in order to achieve a political objective. Therefore, we're going to keep on appealing in order to remove Lula from this jurisdiction, which we believe is not impartial and is not independent, as clearly shown yesterday. The legal community of Brazil is in shock. All of the legal diplomas pertaining to the evidence that was presented has been torn to shreds. And we believe this has been another attack in our democracy, in our rule of law.
And your next step will presumably be the Supreme Court. Do you believe that the Supreme Court is impartial and independent?
And our next step is not the Supreme Court. We have different appeals in different levels of the judiciary in Brazil, but we will take this to the UN. Next week, we're going to file a new submission to the UN, and this trial will be the object of it.
You say that this is political persecution. Who's behind it, in your opinion?
Well, of course, we have a long history of, now in Brazil, since 2014, of misuse of legal means for political ends. It should be investigated. At this point, I do not know who's behind it. I only know that the parts of the judiciary in Brazil are politically persecuting Lula and not fairly prosecuting Lula. And again, corruption must be prosecuted fairly. Otherwise, it will not be fought. Corruption cannot be fought unless within the rule of law. And Lula, as I've always said, is not above any law, but he's not beneath the law. What we witnessed yesterday was a complete lack of compliance with all of the laws of Brazil. And it should not be taken lightly by the Brazilian people.
Does he still want to be president in October?
Absolutely. he can run, and if his party will nominate him, he will run.
If you go through all these levels, as you say, up until the Supreme Court, and I don't understand the Brazilian system as well as you do, but you will appeal and appeal and appeal, and you go to the UN, and all of them uphold the conviction, and all of them say, actually, he is guilty of corruption, will you give up?
Well, we will keep on appealing until there is within our, the legal system, national and international. But we do believe strongly in the evidence that we have produced in the files. We do believe in his innocence. Therefore, I don't believe that an independent and impartial court of law will convict him. And we'll keep on fighting and appealing until he's acquitted, because what he's always made it very clear, he wants to clear his name. He wants to clear his biography. That is what it matters the most to him. He wants to prove his innocence all the way to the end.
Valeska Martins, I thank you very much for joining us on the Newsmakers. Well, the trial has also been condemned, perhaps unsurprisingly, by Lula's protege and successor, former President Dilma Rousseff. She was Brazil's first female leader, but was impeached after the Senate found her guilty of cooking the books. We sent TRT World's Annalise Borges to Brazil to get Rousseff's view on what happened. Here's our exclusive interview.
Breaking news coming in from Brazil. Brazil has impeached former leader Dilma Rousseff.
55 are in favor of impeaching President Rousseff, so she will not be going back to her office today.
She's been accused of breaking budget laws. She says that she didn't. She repeated over and over again that this is the equivalent of a coup d'etat.
For some, she fought in defense of Brazil. For others, she was responsible for the country's downfall. 18 months ago, the divisive Dilma Rousseff lost one of her life's most important battles. The former Marxist guerrilla who took up arms against Brazil's military dictatorship has lived through imprisonment and torture, but says being ousted from office was her darkest hour. Brazil's first female president rode the wave of her popular predecessor and mentor, Lula da Silva. Dilma Rousseff virtually inherited power from him. Most Brazilians thought she lacked the charisma and the political skills to lead the country. But she promised to continue the work the Workers' Party had started. The Partido dos Trabalhadores, or PT, had been elected to change Brazil. And it did, to a certain extent, by lifting hundreds of thousands of people from poverty thanks to generous social programs. But the party fell short of one of its most important promises: to clean up corruption. Instead of ending graft, the PT got sucked into it. From a first scandal called mensalão, or big monthly payment, to the biggest ever in the country's history, the Petrobras kickback scheme. Both staggering in scale, and both implicating Workers' Party politicians. But it didn't stop at the PT. Soon the so-called car wash investigation into corruption at Petrobras revealed nearly the entire political class was, to a certain degree, involved in dodgy deals. Brazilians who had never had that much faith in politicians lost all hope. Foreign investors fled, the economy collapsed, and the country was brought to its knees. Voters blamed the woman in charge. Dilma Rousseff was accused of driving the country to the gutter. Dilma Rousseff's rise and fall has mirrored what happened to Brazil. And while the economy here is now slowly recovering from its worst ever recession, other indicators suggest the prospects for this country and its people are bleak. Most Brazilians will tell you they don't believe this year will be any better than the last, and that nothing here has really improved since Dilma Rousseff's removal from office, as they were led to believe it would.
Porque se falou muito que se tirasse ela, melhoraria a situação. Aí o povo foi nessa conversa, né? Aí eu também achava, né? Tirou e ficou pior ainda.
Estou conseguindo sobreviver porque estou trabalho 14 horas por dia, trabalho em quatro empregos e eu consigo sobreviver. Lamentavelmente tem um monte de outros brasileiros que não conseguem porque não têm emprego, tem 13 milhões de brasileiros desempregados.
Está ruim até para sair de casa, não sabe se sai e volta, porque não tem mais horário para tiroteio, é de manhã, é de noite, é qualquer hora.
Não foi de uma maneira correta. Não fomos nós que tiramos elas de lá, né? Foi o povo que votou, mas não foi a gente que tirou.
I traveled to Brazil to speak to Dilma Rousseff herself. At her home in the country's south, I am going to ask her how did it go so wrong for her and for Brazil.
Se a senhora não se importar, eu vou fazer as perguntas em inglês e depois eu traduzo em português, ou a senhora não precisa... Entenda,
se você falar direitinho e calma.
Direitinho. Então tá ótimo. President Dilma Rousseff, thank you very much for speaking to us. It's been nearly 18 months since you were removed from office, and throughout this process, even before your ouster, you repeatedly said that you were being a victim of an injustice, that you were suffering a coup. When you look back, do you see any mistakes on your part?
Eu não acho que o golpe foi feito por qualquer erro. O golpe foi dado no meu governo pelos acertos do meu governo. E a não ser que a gente tenha uma visão pessoal do que aconteceu, e ela não é uma visão pessoal, ou seja, não se trata apenas de um golpe contra a minha pessoa, trata-se um golpe contra mim como presidente da República e contra o que eu representava. Eu representava um projeto. Esse projeto é contra esse projeto que deram um golpe de Estado.
Why didn't you fight? Why didn't you take to the streets and led a popular revolt? Was it because you didn't really have the support of the people? A lot of people here in Brazil didn't really want you anymore.
Olha, naquele momento houve no Brasil, porque esse golpe ele não ocorre só com base em situações objetivas ou valores objetivos, né? Ele usa a manipulação midiática e todo o processo, que inclusive é bastante interessante, que começa em 2013 aqui no Brasil, que é um processo de tentar construir as condições para que subjetivamente o golpe ocorra. Eu te dou alguns exemplos dessa manipulação mediática e como ele prossegue. E vamos lembrar que aqui no Brasil, em torno de 4 a 5 famílias controlam 90% dos meios de comunicação, rádio, TV. E o que eles falam? Primeiro, eles falam que o Brasil está quebrado. Como que o Brasil está quebrado? O Brasil esteve quebrado quando nós assumimos o governo, e era o governo do Fernando Henrique Cardoso, e ele não tinha reserva suficiente, o Brasil, para pagar sua dívida junto aos credores internacionais, porque a dívida estava em torno de uns 18 bilhões de dólares e nós tínhamos em torno de uns 16 bilhões. Ali ele estava quebrado. Quando nós assumimos, não só no governo do presidente Lula nós pagamos ao Fundo Monetário, mas entre o governo do presidente Lula e o meu governo, nós acumulamos 370 bilhões de dólares de reservas. Nenhum país do mundo está quebrado quando tem 370 bilhões de dólares em reserva. Não tem. Nós somos credores líquidos internacionais.
So I want to ask you about corruption. Brazil still is suffering with the biggest corruption scandal in the history of this country, the kickback scheme at Petrobras. It happened under your watch. And a lot of people here in Brazil were upset. They didn't exactly buy your explanation that you simply didn't know. Do you think you should have been more thorough?
Olha, eu acho interessantíssima essa sua pergunta, porque ela vai contra todas as evidências. Exemplo de evidência. Um belo dia, um senador da República chamado Romero Jucá, que ocasionalmente é um dos maiores líderes do processo golpista, né, uma das figuras estratégicas do golpe, foi gravado por um senador do mesmo partido que estava a serviço do Ministério Público Federal numa investigação de corrupção. O que ele dizia? Ele dizia coisas muito interessantes a respeito de por que tinha de haver um golpe e eu tinha de ser tirada do governo. Não é eu que estou falando, é a liderança dos golpistas que diziam. Por que tem de tirar? Ela tem de sair do governo? Por um motivo muito simples, porque nós temos de estancar a sangria. Enquanto ela estiver lá, ela não impedirá as investigações de corrupção. E a partir do momento em que nós chegarmos lá, nós poderemos controlar essas investigações. Esta foi a fala de um senador tentando persuadir outro senador que ele tinha de estar a favor da minha retirada do governo. Eu acho que hoje há pouquíssimas dúvidas a respeito disso no Brasil. É o inverso do que você falou. Nós patrocinamos o combate à corrupção. Agora, o combate à corrupção no Brasil tem uma característica completamente, hoje, distorcida. E é visível isso. E é por isso. Eu vou explicar qual é a distorção. Primeiro, se estava usando o combate à corrupção de forma seletiva e como arma política. Até hoje está sendo usado seletivamente, porque você não vê nenhum preso do PSDB. Mesmo com acusação de ter propina de 50 milhões, de ter... Todos eles têm propinas fantásticas. E o que fazem conosco? Com Lula inventam que ele ganhou um apartamento triplex numa praia de 280 metros quadrados, numa praia em São Paulo. Aí, primeiro, dizem que ele ganhou esse apartamento porque tem 3 contratos da Petrobras, que beneficiou a empresa OAS, dona do apartamento. E por isso ela teria dado a ele esse apartamento, que chama triplex, que é 8 vezes 3, 24, é 240 metros quadrados. É 8 em 3 andares, 80 metros quadrados em cada andar. Então, vejamos. O próprio juiz reconhece que não há um indício que os 3 contratos tenham servido, na sentença ele reconhece isso, tenham servido tenha qualquer indício que o presidente Lula participou nos 3 contratos para beneficiar a referida empresa. O juiz reconhece. No caso do Brasil, isso se combina com o fato de que o Judiciário e o Ministério Público e os órgãos de investigação de Curitiba se combinam com a mídia para fazer o escândalo, de tal forma que você é julgado primeiro na mídia. É como se a mídia fosse uma instância do judiciário. Lá não tem defesa, querida. Tem só ataque.
You were the first female president of Brazil. How much of what happened to you happened because you are a woman?
Eu acho que a minha condição de mulher foi usada para permitir a construção de uma imagem negativa a meu respeito, essencial para se criar o meio ambiente para o golpe. Então, por exemplo, eu fui descrita pela mídia em que pese eu ter acabado de vencer uma eleição de 54 milhões e meio de votos, como sendo uma pessoa que não gostava de... Enfim, não tinha assim, um impulso para fora. Por quê? Porque era uma mulher dura, era uma mulher fechada em mim mesma, era uma mulher muito rígida. Um homem não seria descrito como um homem duro, fechado em si mesmo. Seria um presidente firme, né? Seria efetivo. Eu fui descrita como sendo uma mulher que só gostava, que ficava, que tinha assim uma insensibilidade. Não procura assim... Não era insensibilidade, porta. Eu era simplesmente sensível excessivamente. Tanto que eu era sensível que eu podia, inclusive, diante do processo de impeachment, me desconstruir. Então, veja bem, não precisa de ter lógica interna. Eu podia ser dura e rígida e ser frágil, extremamente frágil. O homem seria, não seria frágil, né? Ele seria o quê? Sensível. Seria uma pessoa, né, que...
In touch with his feelings.
Isso mesmo. Aquela pessoa que tem a capacidade de transmitir sentimento.
I noticed that you're almost joking now, that you're smiling about this, but I imagine that hurt. No?
Posso falar uma coisa? A gente tem hora, isso eu aprendi, a gente tem hora que ri porque o riso é uma arma da crítica também. Porque se ri quando você identifica a verdade naquilo que está sendo dito. Uma vez, inclusive, uma pessoa disse para mim, mas você é normal. Veja bem, um mundo em que você constrói a anormalidade do outro, é esse o mundo da misoginia. É anormal ser mulher. E ser mulher na política. Então, isso, eu fiz questão, por exemplo, uma das coisas que eu fiz questão de ir ao Senado. Para mostrar
to defend yourself,
que uma mulher pode perfeitamente enfrentar dificuldades com absoluta tranquilidade. Não é tranquilidade no sentido que você não está ligando, mas com a firmeza de quem se acha do lado da justiça. E eu me achava do lado da justiça.
You went through a lot in your life. We know that you were imprisoned, you were tortured in your youth. Was the impeachment the hardest moment in your life?
Eu acho que é. Eu vou explicar por que é. Nisto não vai uma avaliação em relação à intensidade do golpe militar e do impeachment. No golpe militar, eu estava no início da minha vida. Né? Eu fui para a prisão, eu tinha o quê? 20 anos? E tem uma coisa, com 20 anos, a prisão, ela é difícil, ela é dura, mas tem uma perspectiva muito grande de futuro. E o golpe militar foi um golpe muito duro, porque por 21 anos o Brasil ficou completamente fechado, sem direitos, tortura, prisão, morte, exílio, tudo isso. Agora, no golpe, no impeachment, é muito duro você ver destruírem o trabalho efetivo que você está fazendo, que está sendo feito. É uma coisa que dói.
Talked about Lula. You defended your predecessor and your mentor in politics. Do you see Lula as a possible future leader in this country, and would you be part of that?
Eu não acho que o Lula é o próximo líder nesse país. Eu acho que ele é, hoje, o líder nesse país. Eu acho que eles estão com essa perseguição no dia 24 de janeiro de tentar condená-lo, para impedir que ele seja eleito presidente da República, por isto, porque ele é o maior líder popular desse país. E ele é o único, do meu ponto de vista, em condições, agora, para poder recompor, reconstruir o país. Fazer com que o país se encontre consigo mesmo e possa desenvolver não só a sua economia, mas voltar a garantir que a gente olhe para esse povo e considere que ele é a maior riqueza que esse país tem. São os 208 milhões de brasileiros e brasileiras. O Lula pode fazer isso. Eu sempre estarei ao lado, eu sempre seguirei este processo, porque é esse o projeto que eu acredito. Eu acho que...
Would you go back as a part of his government? Would you be a member of Lula's government?
Eu não acredito, e eu vou te falar uma coisa, eu não acredito, em hipótese alguma, que eles, se tiverem uma conduta justa, que compadeça com o Estado Democrático de Direito, eles condenarão o Lula. Agora, se condenarem, eles terão e encontrarão a maior resistência. Nós resistiremos e nós insistiremos, porque esse é um processo que não se esgota nessa luta aqui. Ele é o futuro de uma visão do Brasil desenvolvido como nação, e não medindo só o PIB. Esta é uma questão que tem a ver com o dia 24. O que está em jogo no dia 24 é o futuro do Brasil. O Lula é o futuro do Brasil. Hoje ele representa a possibilidade desse país todo ferido, todo dividido, se recompor. É isso que o Lula representa. E o grande problema é que eu acredito que as condições para isso, nós é que temos de construir. Nós vamos ter de enfrentar e resistir a esse processo de injustiça. Porque é o seguinte, é simples o processo. Você tem uma clara injustiça, porque o Lula é inocente, e isso significa que ele está sendo perseguido politicamente. E eu acho que a população brasileira começou a perceber de forma clara que isso está acontecendo. E isso explica por que, a cada pesquisa que se faz, cresce o apoio a ele. E cresce em todas as classes sociais, cresce em todas as faixas etárias e em todas as regiões do país.
Can we see you? Can we imagine seeing you?
Olha, eu não vou discutir isso. Não é uma questão, eu vou te dizer, ela não é por isso que eu luto. Eu comecei a fazer política há muitos anos atrás. Se você
Would you be interested?
Pois é, mas o maior tempo da minha vida, eu fiz política sem estar em Brasília. Eu não preciso de estar em Brasília para fazer política.
Presidente Dilma Rousseff, muito obrigada por essa entrevista. Muito obrigada, presidente.
Até tem tempo de aposentadoria, viu, gente? Faz conta assim, ó.
Mesmo nessa reforma da Previdência, a
senhora não, nessa reforma eu tenho 64 anos de trabalho, pô.
Well, with me here in the studio is Paulo Roberto França. He's Brazil's Consul General in Istanbul. In London, we have Professor Anthony Pereira. He's the director of the Brazil Institute at King's College London. And in Ljubljana is Drago Kosh. He heads up the OECD's efforts to fight corruption and bribery. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us here on the Newsmakers. Mr. Ambassador, let me begin with you. We have both Dilma Rousseff and Lula da Silva feeling as if there's a witch hunt against them and that the system is rigged against them. Is that accurate?
First of all, I'm very pleased and honored to be here again with you. No, it's not accurate. And I think that it's a piece of fiction, their version of the facts. There was a process of the impeachment that took place during 9 months. The ex-president had very many possibilities to show that she did not commit unlawful acts. And she was not able to do that. She was not able to convince during this process, very traumatic 9 months, that she didn't commit these unlawful acts. I think the same thing can be applied as far as the trial, and yesterday the decision which was taken by the appeal court as far as ex-President Lula is concerned. We as a state, myself as a state agent, in fact we have to respect the decisions of the court, and we have to follow that, as I said, take into account the respect that we have to have for the institutions in our country.
Okay, Anthony Pereira, have we seen justice being served with Lula da Silva's conviction being upheld, or are we seeing more of a situation where the Workers' Party is being unfairly targeted?
Well, I think it's, what you got in both the first instance with Sergio Moro and the second instance with the court in Porto Alegre is an interpretation of the facts. And jurists differ, just as members of the general public differ on whether that's just. I think the Consul General makes some very good points, but I think the reason why this conviction generates some disquiet, even amongst people who are not supporters of Lula and are not supporters of the Workers' Party, is that the institutions do not always work consistently. So the judiciary and the Congress have overlapping jurisdictions, they have battles, the law isn't always applied consistently, and there are real questions over why in certain cases some people are not treated in the same way as in other cases.
Okay, interesting point. So Drago, let me then ask you, is the argument that they're all corrupt and when necessary, those in power or those who have a bit more power than the others can just cherry pick the corruption of the people they want to crush, and that's the problem in Brazil right now?
Well, you see, but this is the argument which is always used by the top officials when they are investigated or sentences for corruption. So the argument, I did it or I didn't do it or I should not be investigated because everybody else is doing it, is something which simply cannot fly. So the OECD, especially the Working Group on Bribery, we support the efforts of the Brazilian law enforcement agencies and judiciary. And we don't care so much who is under investigation, who will be prosecuted, who will be sentenced. What is important is that Brazil deals with its own corruption.
For the time being, Anthony Pereira, it's dividing Brazilian society. Is it worth it in the long run?
Oh, I think it's worth it to try to tackle corruption. I think there's no question that the majority of Brazilians and the majority of the observers abroad want to end systemic corruption. I think the problem is that you sometimes have inequality of treatment. So just to give an example, when Eduardo Cunha, who was then president of the lower house, was charged in the Supreme Court very aggressively asserted their authority, and he was stripped of his immunity, and he's in prison now, actually. When there's similar investigations on Aécio Neves, who was the presidential candidate in 2014, the Supreme Court deferred to Congress and said this is really an issue for Congress. There's a real debate about how well it's being done, and it goes beyond the partisan issue of PT and Lula.
Okay, so Paulo França, inequality of treatment and this idea that and justice for some. Is that a fair argument?
I don't think it's a fair argument because one of our colleagues in this program has just referred to Anthony has just referred to the fact that Eduardo Cunha, he was the president of the Chamber of Deputies in Brazil, and he belonged to another party. So it's not rigged. There are a number of entrepreneurs, big entrepreneurs, that are in jail now because of corruption. I think that there is an effort in Brazil, and we have to welcome this effort to clean up the country from this wrongdoing, from this type of crime. These crimes, in fact, have created a very difficult situation for the population. Let me just mention a very simple example. The other day, the ex-governor of Rio, Sérgio Cabral, appeared handcuffed. And then people in Brazil, he should not have appeared handcuffed. And his mother defended him, saying that he was not a criminal. Then a physician in a hospital, humble physician, doctor in a hospital, said, no, I disagree with the mother. She didn't dealt with the question of being handcuffed or not, but she said, the problem that I face in this hospital every day, people dying. There are no medicines. All this money that was not directed towards the ends that they were supposed to go, towards hospitals, towards roads, towards infrastructure, towards education, was either in the hands of party or in the hands of some corrupt people. So this has to be dealt with in a way that everybody is treated equally and nobody is above the law.
Right. So, Drago, do you believe, from your analysis, looking at it from the outside in, that if it can be proven that, for example, President Temer is corrupt, he will also face the same consequences as Dilma Rousseff and Lula da Silva?
Well, what we would expect that the system would react against everybody in exactly the same way. We even have a special article in the OECD Convention Against Foreign Bribery, which is Article 5, saying that, let's say, the identity of persons involved should not influence in any way the investigations, prosecutions, and the work of judges. I have to mention, though, that, let's say, in the last month, we see some developments in Brazil, which might mean that the conditions for the work of the law enforcers and judges are getting tougher. So the whole system of reaction towards corruption, it is becoming a bit more complicated. And we were expecting to see Brazil coming back to Paris in March, because they will have to tell us what is going on.
Right.
We still hope that the events, let's say, like appointment of the new Director General of the Federal Police, the appointment of the new General Prosecutor, very unfortunate pardon of the current president at the end of the previous year, they're just simply, let's say, mistakes. And we really hope that those are not red flags which will turn into some real impediments for the effective fight against corruption in Brazil for the future.
Yeah, those are interesting warning signs. Anthony Pereira, do you expect trouble between now and October the 7th?
Trouble, you mean in terms of more conflict over
on the
over
streets,
these issues?
with regards to the Workers' Party saying they will make the country ungovernable, with them continuing the fight and Lula still wanting to run for president?
Well, I think Lula and his team, they'll try to go as far as they can, appealing this and keeping him up, keeping as a candidate. But they'll probably, if he ends up exhausting his appeals, they'll probably try to choose another candidate. I think what's interesting is that there may be a debate in Brazil as a result of this pattern that I've been talking about. There may be some discussion of the privileged forum, because this is an institution in which there's about 700 people at the federal level, including President Michel Temer, who can only be judged in the Supreme Court. And that's a very problematic institution if you're talking about the rule of law and the law be applying equally to everybody, because what that means is that the overload in the Supreme Court is so great that it's very hard for the Supreme Court to actually process all these cases. And in fact, many people who've been investigated in Congress, for example, in the ministries, are effectively able to escape punishment, or at least delay it for a very long time because of the privileged forum. So I think you might get a debate about that in Brazil over the next year.
Oh, that's interesting. So, Ambassador Paulo Roberto França, would that be a crinkle in the justice system that is worth addressing?
I think that the question there is that we have to be fair, we have to be even, and we have to follow the rule that everybody is equal. And nobody is above the law. That's something that has to be function as a rule. One thing that I wanted to say that it's very important. I've been to Brazil very recently, and there is a sense of betrayal in the Brazilian population. I took many taxi cabs and I talked to them about different issues, and of course politics is the one that comes all the time. And they have this sense of, they believed in a process, they believed in a platform that began when Lula became president. And they have this feeling that they have been betrayed in this process. And nowadays, we have to deal with what has happened during these days. We have to deal as well with the fact that our economy has to catch up again. The period of President Dilma was disastrous in terms of management. Now, President Temir is putting the economy again on the tracks. We are beginning to grow, we are beginning to create jobs, and of course there is the question of justice. Of course there is. What we have to do is to leave the justice to follow its path.
Well, it's going to be interesting to see if there's going to be a battle between those who felt betrayed and those who feel there's a betrayal of their leadership, who they still love. For example, Lula and Dilma, and they feel have been treated unjustly. Fascinating times in Brazil. Gentlemen, I have to move on, so my apologies. Paulo Roberto França, Anthony Pereira, and Drago Kos, thank you very much for your input on the Newsmakers.
Thank you.
Still to come, 7 years since the Egyptian revolution, but is the country any closer to democracy? Welcome back to the Newsmakers. 7 years ago, hundreds of thousands of Egyptians demanded democracy on the streets of Cairo. Many thought they succeeded when their protests ousted then-President Hosni Mubarak, who'd been in power for more than 30 years. But how much progress has Egypt actually made? After all, the current president, Abdel Sisi, took control after a military coup. But credit where credit is due, Sisi is holding an election in March. Only thing is, he'll be the only one running. Shoaib Hassan reports.
In Egypt, many feel the future of the democracy is under threat. Thursday marks the 7th anniversary of the 2011 Egyptian uprising. It's happening as Abdel Fattah al-Sisi, former military ruler and current president, ensures that he will be re-elected.
المطلوب حاجة واحدة بس. إن كنتم حسيتم أو لكم تقدير لحاجة أنا عملتها للبلد ديت، أرجو إن أنتم تنزلوا مش عشان تختاروني، لا والله. اختاروا ما شئتم بس انزلوا.
The problem is there are no other candidates left in the race after one was arrested while another pulled out. The protests in 2011 were the high point of the Arab Spring. In Egypt's Tahrir Square, demonstrators battled security forces, shaking the foundations of Cairo's powerful security establishment, leading to the ouster of longtime President Hosni Mubarak. That paved the way for the country's first free election a year later, which brought Mohamed Morsi to power. But facing protests and accusations of being autocratic, as well as a hostile security establishment, his time as the head of the government was short-lived. He was removed from power in 2013 in a coup led by Sisi, a former protege of Mubarak. Morsi is now in jail on what his party says are trumped-up charges of abuse of power. He's unlikely to be released. Meanwhile, Sisi continues to consolidate his power and appears set to rule for the foreseeable future. And that appears to be reluctantly accepted by Egyptians, wary of the unrest and violence. But does that also mean an end to the drive for greater freedom begun in Tahrir Square 7 years ago? Shoaib Hassan, the Newsmakers.
Well, joining us now from London is Mustafa Ragab. He's the director and founder of Egyptian Affairs UK. And also Ali Al-Kabani. He's the former general manager of the Islamic Press Agency. Gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining us. Mustafa Ragab, let me ask you very directly, this upcoming presidential election, does it have any credibility and any democracy in it?
Obviously, anyone who's got the ability and anyone who can fit the criteria can stand up for the election. We've seen a few people coming forward, but they have to comply with what is needed. Obviously, will they be able to or not to, that's a different matter.
Okay, so Ali Al-Kabani, if you pass the test, you can be a candidate. It's a free and fair election.
The presidential election in Egypt is a big joke. The whole world knows about it. The outcome of this election is already known years ago, that a military coup leader will never leave his seat by the ballot box. Those who came with the gun and over the tank will never leave except by the gun and the tank. Anyone who dares to challenge the dictator of Egypt now, he goes to jail and his image and reputation is tarnished. He is accused of being corrupt. Even those from inside the military establishment itself, like Al-Fariq Ahmed Shafiq, and now Al-Fariq Sami Anan, who was the chief of staff of the Egyptian army. So if this guy was a thief and a corrupt, and he doesn't know the military rule, so who inside this establishment knows? We actually all know the corruption of this establishment, but it is now exposed by their own leaders. Abdel Fattah al-Sisi now, like Mohammed bin Salman in Saudi Arabia, are exposing the generals of the military establishment are as cheap, corrupt, and poor thieves who are using their position and their authority to loot the wealth of the Egyptian people.
So let's bring in Mustafa Ragab. And let me just add to this the fact that we're looking at the 7-year anniversary of the revolution. So tie in your response to the fact that many people say what Sisi is doing is no different to what Mubarak was doing, or maybe it's even worse.
Let me just come
exactly
to your
the same
guest
regime.
in the other studio. Your guest in the other studio making a very, very serious statement and making a false allegation, and it is clear that he's trying to promote his own
false
issue.
allegation. Where is Ahmed Shafiq and Sami Anan today?
Not to go on a TV interview. You are promoting your own issues, my friend. And when you ask and when you say the people who came with the gun must go with the gun, what are you actually asking for? Are you asking for Syria? Are you asking for Iraq? Do you take the responsibility for what you're saying now? I like when you come to a TV interview that you talk sensibly and you make the people. I don't know. The Egyptian people are happy with what they are. The Egyptian people gonna go to the voting day and decide who is gonna rule them.
The Egyptian people don't dare to open their mouths because Sisi built the jails to take them all there.
Who are you? Who are you to decide and talk about the Egyptian people or talk on their behalf? I cannot do that myself.
Egyptian people.
The Egyptian
and who
people,
are you to talk on behalf of the Egyptian people?
The Egyptian people will talk for themselves on the day of the election. So when you come and say people who came with the gun must go with the gun,
exactly. That's if there is a real election. There is no real election.
Have you got the gun? Have you got the gun to do that? Have you got the courage to do that? You people who just come on TV interview and asking for blood,
and
then when the fight come to the street, you all disappear. This is what happened with the Brotherhood leaders. When it came to the real fight, they all disappeared and left the poor people there in the streets of Cairo to face the blood. You all disappear. You just come on the TV and asking the people to fight. Can you fight? Can you go down to the streets of Egypt and fight yourself?
Okay, so let me ask
Can you carry a gun?
Okay, fair
Can
enough.
you go and fight against the army?
You've asked a bunch of questions there, Mr. Ragab.
You are making a very false allegation and coming to promote your own issue, not to go on a TV interview.
Okay, I have a question for you, Ali Al-Kabani, and then a question after that for Mr. Ragab. Ali Al-Kabani, let me ask you. I'm not going to ask you if you're willing to take a gun and go and fight on the streets. But what I want to ask you, given that Mr.
No,
Ragab...
because I'm not a thug like Sisi to do that.
Okay, given that Mr. Ragab mentioned Syria and Iraq, one of the arguments, particularly coming from Western backers of Sisi, is that there might not be a whole lot of democracy in Egypt right now, but he's a stability candidate. Is there any truth in that?
This is nonsense and cheap propaganda of the Sisi's propaganda.
You mean to deny there is stability on the streets of Egypt now? Do you mean to deny that there is a stability in the streets of Egypt now?
Any dictator, any dictator would have a stability
that the
by the gun
walk safe
and opening his jail.
Now?
Let me talk to the people. Please let me talk to the people, and the people of Egypt know your propaganda very well, because the propaganda machine of Sisi is working 7/24. So let me tell the Egyptian people the situation.
If what you're saying is true,
alternative, listen and
you
learn.
should be the one in jail
democracy.
Why are you going to teach me? If
what you're
saying is true, then you should be in jail now. You're talking freely. You're talking a lot of nonsense, and you're not in jail. You're not in jail, are you?
Well, he's in London.
If I'm in Egypt, they will put me in jail.
He's in London. Okay,
I'm
Mr.
in
Ragab,
London.
Okay,
That's
fair
why
enough.
I'm
Let me ask
talking
you.
my mind.
Yeah, you're both in London, and this is good that we're having this conversation. Mustafa Ragab, let me ask you. I guess you can agree that Senator John McCain...
I didn't answer your question because he was interrupting me.
Okay, so answer it. Go. 20 seconds, answer it, and then I've got a question for Mr. Ragab. Go ahead, Mr. Kabani, and please don't interrupt, Mr. Ragab.
To fool the Egyptian people and saying the price of stability is to accept military dictatorship and to accept to act as slaves to these military establishments is nonsense. And they give you always the example of Syria and Iraq. What about the example of democratic, respected countries in the whole world who have got flourishing economy and people are enjoying their dignity and freedom of speech? It's all propaganda machine in Egypt, brainwashing the Egyptian people. Is the alternative to Sisi is the condition of a civil war like in Syria and Iraq. And actually the situation in Syria and Iraq now is so much better than the situation in Egypt when you have a military regime in which the ex-chief of staff of the Egyptian army is not safe. Okay. And he cannot speak his mind.
Okay, fair enough.
And he cannot put his name as a candidate for the coming election.
I do think some people would disagree with the fact that in a place like Syria, where more than 400,000 people have been killed, that is somehow better than Egypt right now. But let me ask Mustafa Ragab. I want to ask you this question. I think you can agree that Senator John McCain is not a member of the Muslim Brotherhood, and he has no Brotherhood agendas. Yet he came out and he said, over the past few years, we have witnessed Egypt lurch dangerously backwards. President Sisi's unprecedented crackdown on political activism and fundamental human rights has led to the imprisonment of tens of thousands of dissidents, including 19 American citizens and nearly 3,500 young people. He went on to mention torture, lack of a free press, and so on. You can't disagree with that, can you, Mr. Ragab?
Of course I can disagree, because Mr. McCain, and not just Mr. McCain, the whole American administration are playing a very dirty game in the Middle East, and what they want to achieve, they have achieved it, but not in Egypt.
But your President
so
Sisi is a client to this regime.
No.
Sisi made Egypt a client state to the Americans.
You are very unhappy when I interrupt you, so you should do the same thing. Do not interrupt me when I'm talking, please.
Okay,
because what you just said is a very laughable,
many times.
Very laughable statement. What you said, that the situation in Iraq and Syria is better than Egypt. I don't know what planet you come from. I don't know what news do you watch. I don't know where you get your knowledge from, if you have any knowledge. I just laughed and laughed and laughed at what you were saying. But if we go back to Egypt,
so carry on laughing, as I laugh about you and all the hypocrites of Sisi.
There is a price people pay for everything. And the price that people pay for the stability of the streets in Egypt now is that some people will be victims.
Is losing their dignity and freedom.
Now are
this is the price they are paying.
Doing the wrong things. And my friend, you're talking about freedom. My goodness gracious. If you don't have freedom, you will be in jail. What you said just now, you should be standing in a court.
Okay,
you should be charged for what you say.
I know, but again, as we determined, he's actually in London. He's not in Cairo, so they can't really get him there. But unfortunately, I've got to move on. I've really enjoyed this discussion. Gentlemen, I appreciate you taking the time to come on the Newsmakers. Mustafa Ragab and Ali Al-Kabani, thank you very much for joining us. That's all for this edition of the Newsmakers with me, Imran Garda. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.